Keanu Reeves walked into the Inside Talk studio with the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing to prove. The audience buzzed with anticipation, but Nathan Carter, the show's notoriously sharp-tongued host, had a different energy. He wasn't here to admire Keanu, he was here to dismantle him. With a smirk, he shuffled his cue cards, ready to pull the rug out from under Hollywood's most beloved enigma. But what he didn't realize was that Keanu Reeves wasn't just another guest, he was a force of nature. As the cameras rolled, Nathan wasted no time diving into his well-crafted verbal traps. He questioned Keanu's unwavering humility, poking at the idea that no one could be as kind as the internet made him out to be. He dismissed Keanu's philanthropic efforts as mere PR stunts, hinting at an ulterior motive behind his generosity. But Keanu never flinched. He never raised his voice. Instead, he leaned forward with a quiet, steady gaze and answered with the kind of sincerity that couldn't be faked. Kindness isn't a strategy. It's not a performance. It's simply the right thing to do. The room shifted. The audience, once prepared for a spectacle, now found themselves captivated by something far more rare: authenticity. Nathan, sensing his grip on the conversation slipping, tried one final gambit, turning the discussion toward politics. But Keanu, ever unshaken, dismantled the premise with a single, devastating line: helping someone in need isn't a political statement, it's human decency. The crowd erupted in applause. In that moment, the power dynamic flipped. Nathan had set out to expose Keanu, but in the end, it was Nathan who stood exposed. And Keanu? He had already won before the first question was ever asked. When Keanu Reeves stepped onto the Inside Talk stage, he carried with him an aura that was impossible to ignore, an effortless presence that made the audience lean in, not out. Nathan Carter, the show's host, sat across from him, his carefully rehearsed smile masking a more predatory intent. This wasn't going to be another soft, feel-good interview. Nathan had built his reputation on making his guests squirm, on exposing contradictions, on turning public darlings into headlines. And tonight, his target was Keanu. The audience expected a polite exchange, maybe a few viral sound bites. But what they got was something far more powerful: a battle of integrity versus manipulation, and a masterclass in unshakable composure. Nathan wasted no time. He leaned in, smirking, and asked, "The internet calls you the nicest guy in Hollywood. But let's be honest, nobody's that perfect. Isn't it all just a well-crafted image?" The audience murmured, sensing the shift in tone. Keanu, unbothered, took a breath before answering, "I've never tried to be perfect. I just try to be decent." The response was simple, but it landed like a heavyweight punch. Nathan's expression flickered, but he wasn't ready to concede. He pressed further, questioning Keanu's philanthropy, insinuating that his generosity was performative, a way to maintain his untouchable reputation. But Keanu, again, refused to take the bait. Helping someone isn't about optics. It's about doing what's right, whether people see it or not. The audience erupted in applause. Nathan, however, wasn't done. Sensing his control slipping, he played his final card: politics. He suggested that Keanu's charitable giving wasn't just generosity but a veiled political statement, perhaps even an endorsement of a particular ideology. The trap was set, the kind designed to make celebrities stumble, to force them into a headline-worthy misstep. But Keanu? He simply smiled. Then, in the calmest, most measured voice, he said, "The idea that helping people is political is the real problem. Feeding a hungry child isn't socialism. Making sure a sick person gets medicine isn't left or right, it's basic human decency." Silence. Then, applause. Loud. Sustained. This wasn't just another interview anymore. This was a moment. Nathan Carter had come to expose Keanu Reeves, but in the end, it was Nathan who had been exposed. And Keanu? He had never even needed to fight. When Keanu Reeves walked onto the Inside Talk stage, the audience erupted in applause, their admiration evident in every cheer. He wasn't just a Hollywood icon, he was a legend, a man whose kindness and humility had transcended fame, making him one of the most beloved figures in the industry. Across from him sat Nathan Carter, a host known for his razor-sharp questions and relentless pursuit of controversy. Nathan didn't just interview his guests, he dissected them. He found their weak spots, their inconsistencies, and used them to manufacture the viral moments that would dominate headlines the next day. But tonight, he wasn't sitting across from just any celebrity. He was facing Keanu Reeves. And what he didn't realize was that his usual tactics weren't going to work, not this time. Nathan started with subtle jabs, disguised as compliments. "Keanu, you have this almost mythical reputation, kind, humble, generous. But let's be honest, no one is that perfect, right?" The audience chuckled, waiting for Keanu's response. But he didn't flinch. He simply smiled, the kind of calm, knowing smile that disarmed even the most calculated attacks. "I don't think kindness should ever be exhausting," he said. His words weren't defensive, they weren't combative, they were effortless. The audience clapped, but Nathan wasn't done. He leaned in, pushing harder. "But doesn't it ever feel like an illusion? Hollywood builds narratives. Maybe yours is just a really good one." Keanu considered the question, then answered with a simple truth: "I've never asked for a narrative. I just try to live in a way that feels right to me." Another wave of applause rippled through the audience. Nathan shifted slightly in his chair. His usual playbook wasn't working. Realizing he needed a bigger swing, Nathan pivoted to what he believed was his strongest angle: politics. He brought up Keanu's donations, his well-documented philanthropy, and tried to frame it as something more than just generosity. "Your donations align with certain social policies. Some would even call them wealth redistribution. That's a bit socialist, wouldn't you say?" The trap was set. If Keanu agreed, he'd alienate certain viewers. If he denied it, he'd seem like he was backtracking. Either way, Nathan expected to control the narrative. But Keanu simply smiled again, his response as effortless as ever. "The idea that helping people is political is the real problem." The room went silent. Then he added, "Feeding someone who's hungry isn't socialism, it's kindness. Making sure a child gets medicine isn't a political statement, it's human decency." The audience exploded in applause, and for the first time that night, Nathan looked rattled. He had spent his career putting guests on the defensive, forcing them into viral mistakes. But Keanu had flipped the script. He hadn't just dodged the traps, he had rendered them meaningless. As the interview wrapped, Nathan forced a smile, knowing full well that he had lost. The audience wasn't looking at him anymore. They were looking at Keanu, a man who had just redefined what strength really meant. Not through aggression. Not through argument. But through unwavering authenticity. Nathan had set out to expose Keanu Reeves. But in the end, it was Nathan who had been exposed. And Keanu? He had never needed to fight at all. When Keanu Reeves walked onto the Inside Talk stage, the energy in the room shifted. There was something about him, something steady, something real. He wasn't just another Hollywood celebrity playing the talk show circuit. He was different. Authentic. A man who had endured heartbreak, loss, and adversity, yet never let it harden him. Across from him sat Nathan Carter, a host notorious for his ability to dismantle even the most composed guests. He had made a career out of exposing flaws, out of pushing celebrities into defensive corners and twisting their words into controversy. But tonight, he was about to learn a hard lesson, because Keanu Reeves wasn't like the others. Nathan started with a well-worn tactic, the carefully disguised challenge. "Keanu, you have this reputation as the nicest guy in Hollywood. Always giving, always humble. But let's be honest, nobody is that perfect. Isn't it just a little exaggerated? He smirked, waiting for Keanu to falter. But Keanu didn't blink. Instead, he smiled, calm, unwavering. I don't think kindness should be seen as extraordinary. It should be normal. The response was effortless, yet it hit with the weight of truth. The audience clapped, but Nathan wasn't ready to back down. He leaned in, sharpening his words. Come on, though. Nobody lives without contradiction. Maybe Hollywood has just built a really good narrative around you. Keanu remained unshaken. I've never asked for a narrative. I just try to live in a way that feels right to me. The audience murmured in approval. Nathan shifted in his chair. His usual methods weren't landing the way he expected. Sensing the need to escalate, Nathan moved to his next tactic, questioning Keanu's generosity. You've given millions to charity, hospitals, and social programs. But some critics say that charity doesn't actually fix anything. That it's more of a temporary feel-good gesture than a real solution. The audience tensed, sensing the sharpness in his words. But Keanu, as always, remained composed. He thought for a moment before answering, his voice steady. Helping one person doesn't mean you've solved the world's problems. But it means you've helped one person. And sometimes, that's enough. The audience erupted in applause. Nathan, however, wasn't done. He pressed on. But isn't true empowerment about teaching people to be self-sufficient, not just handing out money? Keanu's response was simple, yet profound. You assume those two things are separate. Another round of applause. Nathan was losing them, and he knew it. Then came the final play, the political trap. Nathan glanced down at his notes, then back up. Your donations align with certain social policies. Some people would say that what you're doing is a form of wealth redistribution. Maybe even socialism. What do you say to that? The audience held its breath. It was the perfect setup. If Keanu agreed, he risked alienating a large portion of his fanbase. If he denied it, he'd appear defensive, as if his generosity needed justification. But Keanu saw through the game. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. The idea that helping people is political is the real problem. Silence. Then, in that same calm, grounded voice, he added, feeding someone who's hungry isn't socialism, it's kindness. Making sure a sick child gets medicine isn't a political statement, it's human decency. The audience exploded. Applause thundered through the room. Nathan shifted uncomfortably, realizing he had lost control of the narrative. Keanu had answered every question, not with aggression, not with defense, but with undeniable truth. As the interview wrapped up, Nathan forced a smile. Well, Keanu, it's been a pleasure having you here tonight. Keanu nodded warmly. Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate the conversation. And that was the final blow. Not a debate. Not a confrontation. A conversation, one Nathan had never truly been in control of. As the cameras cut, Nathan saw it in the faces of the audience, in the roaring applause that still hadn't stopped. They weren't looking at him. They weren't waiting for his closing remarks. They were looking at Keanu Reeves, with respect, admiration, and something deeper. In his attempt to expose Keanu, Nathan had only exposed himself. And as Keanu calmly stood and walked off the stage, it was clear, he had won long before the first question was ever asked. When Keanu Reeves walked onto the Inside Talk stage, the audience didn't just cheer, they felt something. It wasn't just admiration, it was a connection, a deep-rooted respect for a man who had remained grounded despite the whirlwind of fame. Across from him sat Nathan Carter, the sharp-witted talk show host who had built his career on controversy. Nathan had one goal tonight, to shake Keanu, to expose a flaw, to turn the internet's favorite nice guy into just another Hollywood illusion. He had done it before. He was good at it. But what he didn't realize was that tonight, he wasn't facing an average celebrity. He was facing a man who had spent decades walking through fire and had never once let it burn him. Nathan started with charm, flashing his signature smirk. "Keanu, you have this reputation, kind, humble, generous. But let's be real. Nobody's that perfect. Isn't it exhausting to keep up that image?" The audience chuckled, but there was an edge in the air. Keanu simply smiled. He wasn't rattled. He wasn't preparing a defense. He was just there, completely present, completely in control. "I don't think kindness should ever be exhausting," he said simply. The room shifted. The audience responded with quiet murmurs of approval. Nathan's smirk faltered just slightly, but he continued, pushing harder. "But isn't it possible that Hollywood has crafted a narrative around you? That you're playing into an image people want to see?" Keanu tilted his head slightly, considering the question before responding. "I've never asked for a narrative. I just try to live in a way that feels right to me." The audience clapped, soft at first, then stronger. Nathan's jaw tightened slightly. This wasn't going how he had planned. Realizing he needed to turn up the heat, Nathan moved to a calculated strike. "You're known for giving away millions to charity. That's great, but some critics say charity doesn't solve real problems. That it's just a way for the rich to feel good without making real change." The audience tensed, sensing the weight of the question. But Keanu, as always, didn't flinch. "Helping one person doesn't mean you've fixed the world," he said, his voice calm, steady. "But it means you've helped one person. And sometimes, that's enough." The audience erupted into applause, and for the first time that night, Nathan shifted in his chair. His job was to create tension, to stir controversy. But Keanu wasn't playing the game. He wasn't engaging in the fight Nathan was trying to manufacture. He was just answering, honestly, effortlessly. Nathan, feeling the interview slipping from his control, went for the knockout punch. "Some people say real empowerment isn't about just giving money away. It's about teaching people to be self-sufficient." It was a trap, subtle, but sharp. The kind that usually forced guests into stammering explanations, defensive justifications. But Keanu? He just smiled. "You assume those two things are separate," he said. Another wave of applause. Nathan exhaled, glancing briefly at his producers offstage. They weren't liking this. He had one last shot, the question designed to corner Keanu, to force him into a politically charged moment that would become the next day's headline. Nathan leaned in, voice smooth but loaded. "Your donations align with certain social policies. Some people might even call them wealth redistribution. That's a bit socialist, wouldn't you say?" The audience inhaled collectively. This was the moment that could turn the tide. But Keanu saw the setup. He saw the way Nathan framed it, the trap designed to make him stumble. And he dismantled it with ease. "The idea that helping people is political is the real problem," he said. Silence. Then, leaning in slightly, he added, "Feeding someone who's hungry isn't socialism, it's kindness. Making sure a sick child gets medicine isn't a political statement, it's human decency." The audience exploded in applause, louder than before. This wasn't just agreement. It was relief, a collective exhale from people who had grown tired of the constant need to categorize compassion. Nathan sat back, gripping his cue cards slightly tighter. He had lost. And worse, he knew it. As the show wrapped up, Nathan forced a tight smile. "Well, Keanu, it's been a pleasure having you on tonight." Keanu nodded, warm as ever. "Thanks, Nathan. I appreciate the conversation." And that was it, the final, effortless victory. Not a debate. Not a confrontation. Just a conversation. And yet, Nathan had been outmaneuvered at every turn, not through aggression, not through argument, but through unwavering truth. The cameras cut, the stage lights dimmed, and as Keanu stood up to leave, Nathan saw something that made his stomach sink. The audience wasn't watching him. They weren't waiting for his closing words. Their eyes were on Keanu, their applause still lingering in the air. Nathan had spent years crafting narratives, breaking down Hollywood's biggest names. But tonight, he had tried to expose Keanu Reeves, and in doing so, had only exposed himself. Keanu walked off the stage, unchanged, unshaken. For him, this was just another conversation. For Nathan, it was something else entirely. Because the truth was undeniable, the man he had set out to unravel had never even needed to fight. He had won before the first question was ever asked. When Keanu Reeves walked onto the Inside Talk stage, the air in the studio felt different. There was an unspoken energy, a presence that demanded respect without a single word being spoken. Across from him sat Nathan Carter, a talk show host infamous for his sharp tongue and relentless pursuit of controversy. He had made a career out of exposing celebrities, out of twisting their words and trapping them in moments of weakness. But tonight, his usual tactics were about to meet an immovable force, Keanu Reeves. Nathan began with an easy smile, a casual lean forward, setting the stage for what the audience thought would be another routine interview. Keanu, you have this almost mythical reputation, the nicest guy in Hollywood, the man who can do no wrong. But let's be real, nobody is that perfect. Doesn't it ever get exhausting? The question was framed like an observation, but its purpose was clear, to plant a seed of doubt. Keanu, however, didn't miss a beat. He smiled softly, his voice as steady as ever. I don't think kindness should ever be exhausting. It's not an act. It's just how I try to live. The response was simple, yet profound. The audience clapped, not just out of admiration, but out of recognition of something rare, sincerity. Nathan's smirk faltered for just a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. Undeterred, Nathan leaned in, shifting gears. But let's talk about Hollywood for a second. It's a place built on image, on carefully crafted personas. Isn't it possible that the world sees you a certain way because it's what they want to see? Maybe you're just playing the role they expect. The trap was set. If Keanu agreed, he'd be admitting to being an illusion. If he denied it, he'd sound defensive. But once again, Keanu refused to play the game. He tilted his head slightly, considering his words before responding. I've never asked for a narrative. I just try to do what feels right. If people respect that, great. If they don't, that's okay too. The crowd murmured in approval. Nathan was beginning to realize something unsettling. Keanu wasn't just answering his questions. He was dismantling them. Seeing his usual tactics fail, Nathan decided to go for the heart of the matter, Keanu's generosity. You've donated millions to charity, hospitals, education programs. That's admirable. But some critics argue that charity is just a temporary fix. That giving money doesn't solve systemic problems. How do you respond to that? The room went quiet. It was a sharp question, one designed to put Keanu on the defensive. But Keanu simply took a breath, his expression unwavering. Helping one person doesn't mean you've solved the world's problems. But it means you've helped one person. And sometimes, that's enough. The applause that followed wasn't just polite, it was thunderous. Nathan's fingers drummed lightly against his chair. He had spent years crafting questions that left celebrities scrambling for words. But Keanu Reeves? He was answering with the kind of clarity that left no room for argument. Nathan knew he was running out of time. He needed a defining moment, a clip that would go viral, something to put Keanu in a difficult position. He glanced at his notes before delivering his final play. Some people believe that true empowerment isn't about just giving away money, it's about teaching people to be self-sufficient. Wouldn't you agree? A classic pivot. A question designed to force Keanu into contradicting himself. But Keanu didn't even hesitate. He smiled slightly, then responded with effortless wisdom. You assume those two things are separate. Silence. Then, another wave of applause. Frustrated but keeping his cool, Nathan took one last shot, aiming for the most divisive ground, politics. Your donations align with certain social causes. Some would even call them a form of wealth redistribution. That's a bit socialist, wouldn't you say? The audience tensed. This was the kind of question that forced people into political corners, into labels that alienated one side or the other. But Keanu, ever unshaken, leaned forward slightly, meeting Nathan's gaze with quiet strength. The idea that helping people is political is the real problem, he said. The room went still. Then, with the same calm, he added, feeding a hungry person isn't socialism, it's kindness. Making sure a sick child gets medicine isn't a political statement, it's basic human decency. The audience exploded into applause. But this time, it wasn't just admiration, it was conviction. Nathan, for the first time that night, had nothing to say. He had walked into this interview expecting to control the conversation, to steer Keanu into a moment of weakness. Instead, Keanu had turned every question into a statement of truth, leaving Nathan with nothing but a handful of failed strategies. As the show wrapped up, Nathan forced a smile, extending his hand. Well, Keanu, it's been a pleasure having you. Keanu, as gracious as ever, shook his hand and replied, Thanks, Nathan. I appreciate the conversation. And that was the moment, the final, effortless victory. Not an argument. Not a battle. Just a conversation, one that Nathan had never truly been in control of. As the cameras cut, Nathan looked out at the audience. They weren't watching him. They weren't waiting for his final word. Their eyes were locked on Keanu Reeves, their applause still lingering in the air. In his attempt to expose Keanu, Nathan had only exposed himself. And Keanu? He had won long before the first question was ever asked. The story of Keanu Reeves' interview isn't just about a celebrity outmaneuvering a talk show host, it's a masterclass in integrity, grace, and the power of authenticity. In today's world, where public figures are often scrutinized and forced into defensive positions, Keanu showed us something rare, the ability to stand firm without aggression, to respond with wisdom instead of hostility. His approach teaches us that real strength isn't about fighting back, it's about staying true to who you are, regardless of the pressure around you. This lesson extends far beyond Hollywood. In everyday life, we all face situations where people challenge our values, question our motives, or try to push us into conflict. The way Keanu handled Nathan Carter's tactics reminds us that we don't need to play someone else's game to win. When we lead with kindness, honesty, and calm confidence, we take control of the narrative. We show that authenticity is stronger than manipulation. At the heart of it all, Keanu's words remind us that kindness isn't political, generosity isn't performative, and doing the right thing doesn't require justification. In a world that thrives on division, being genuinely good is the most powerful statement of all.